My parents sold Grandma's 1896 Steinway to buy my sister a Mercedes. From hospice, Grandma then dialed one number saying, "Sunday. My house. Bring the deed." My parents pulled off the ultimate betrayal. They sold my dying grandmother's antique piano, the one she promised me, just to buy my sister a luxury car. They thought Grandma was too ill in hospice to ever find out, and they thought I was too weak to tell her. They were dead wrong. When I finally whispered the truth to Grandma in her hospice room, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just grabbed her phone, dialed one number, and uttered 7 words that would utterly destroy everything my parents thought they owned. "Sunday, my house. Bring the deed." And trust me, what happened next at my mother's 62nd birthday party? It was unforgettable. Let me take you back to the day it all began, that Tuesday afternoon when my grandmother was admitted to hospice. The call came right after my last piano lesson. "Margaret has had another heart attack," my father, Thomas Bennett, explained. No greetings, no warmth. Just a blunt. "She is stable, but they are transferring her to hospice. Family meeting at the hospital in 90 minutes. I dropped everything. When I arrived, my parents and my sister, Haley, were already huddled in a corner of the waiting room, speaking in hushed tones. My father stood with his arms crossed, his usual intimidating stance. My mother, Claire Bennett, clutched her designer purse like it was the only thing keeping her together. Haley, 5 years younger than me, and always the favorite, was scrolling through her phone, barely even looking up. "Good, you're here," my father said to me, without even looking up. "No, how are you holding up?" "No, this must be difficult for you. Just pure logistics. We need to distribute responsibilities. Someone should visit Mother every day," he added. "Claire and I have a business to run. And Haley is in a critical situation with Carter Reynolds' family." Carter Reynolds, Haley's boyfriend of 9 months, was the son of my father's main business partner. Of course. "So, Natalie," my father looked at me as if assigning me a chore. "You will handle the visits. Your schedule is flexible. Teachers don't typically work overtime." I wanted to scream. "I teach music to 42 children every week. I run after-school programs. My time had value too, but I held my tongue. "Of course," I replied quietly. "I want to be with her anyway." "Perfect." My father had already turned away, dismissing me. "Keep us updated if anything changes." As I walked toward Grandma's room, I heard my mother's voice drift down the hallway, intended only for Haley's ears. "At least she's useful for something." I just kept walking. I didn't turn around. Not because I didn't hear it, but because I'd grown so accustomed to that kind of casual pain, I'd stopped expecting it to be acknowledged. Grandma Margaret Whitmore's room smelled of lavender and old books. She insisted on both. "They try to make everything smell like antiseptic," she explained during my first visit. "I refuse. If I'm going to die, I want to do so surrounded by the things I care about." She was 78, sharp as a blade, and dying from congestive heart failure. The doctors gave her 6 weeks, maybe 2 or 3 months if she was lucky. I went every day after school. We talked about music, about her years performing in concert halls throughout the Northeast, and about my students who couldn't read notes but could feel rhythm in their bones. One evening, she reached for my hand. Her grip was weaker than I remembered, but her eyes were fierce. "Natalie, I need you to know something." "Anything, Grandma." "The Steinway." She paused, letting the word settle. "My mother's piano, the one from 1896. I was very familiar with it. I first learned scales on those ivory keys when I was 8 years old. That piano had been the soundtrack to my childhood, the only place in the family where I felt truly understood. "It's yours," she stated firmly. "I already informed Thomas and Claire. I informed them last month, in front of everyone. That piano belongs to you." I remembered that conversation. My father's jaw had tightened. My mother exchanged looks with Haley. My sister rolled her eyes and said something about sentimental junk. Grandma, you don't have to. I want to. She squeezed my hand. You are the only one who knows what it means. Promise me you'll take care of it. I promise. She smiled then, a knowing smile that seemed to conceal secrets I couldn't see. There are some things more valuable than money, child, and some people who need to learn that lesson the hard way. 3 weeks later, everything changed. Grandma had asked me to bring some old photographs from her house, ones from her performing days that she wanted to see one last time. I still had a key, so I drove over from school on a rainy Thursday afternoon. The house was too quiet. I walked through the foyer, past the dining room, and into the living room where the Steinway had stood for 3 decades. The space was empty. I stopped breathing. Where the piano should have been, there was only a rectangular indent in the carpet, a ghost of something that had lived there for decades, violently removed. My hands shook as I took out my phone. Mom. My voice cracked. Where is Grandma's piano? A pause. My mother's voice was casual and dismissive. Your father handled it. Nat, it's time to get serious. You shouldn't be concerned about it. Handled it? How? Where is it? I said, Don't worry about it, Nat. Click. She hung up on me. I stood in that empty living room for what seemed like hours, staring at the indentation in the carpet. The rain pattered against the windows. Thunder sounded in the distance. I drove to my parents' house that evening. My father answered the door with a glass of scotch in his hand, looking annoyed by the interruption. The piano, I said. What have you done? He didn't even flinch. We sold it. I received $12,500 for it. Good price. The entire world tilted. You sold it? Grandma said it was mine. Grandma's dying, Nat. He took a sip of his drink. She doesn't need a piano. And neither do you. Behind him, I heard the jingle of car keys. Haley appeared in the corridor, grinning. New keys for a new car. You bought her a car? With Grandma's piano. My voice sounded flat. My father shrugged as if I'd asked about the weather. Mercedes-Benz. Haley needs to make a good impression on the Reynolds. Carter's family is very particular about appearances. That piano was supposed to be mine. So what would you do with it? My mother appeared behind my father, arms crossed. You teach children's music classes, Nat. You don't perform. You don't have the space. Haley needed the money for her future. Her future. I repeated the words, tasting the bitterness. Haley entered the foyer, swinging her new keys like a trophy. Don't get jealous, Nat. It's not a good look. She smiled with all her teeth. Maybe if you'd picked a better career, you could afford nice things too. I looked at my parents, my sister, and the life they'd created for themselves, where I was always the afterthought, the one whose needs came last. Does Grandma know? Silence. Is she aware you sold her piano? My mother's expression hardened. She is in hospice, Natalie. She takes morphine half the time. She doesn't need to know anything that will make her upset. Do you mean you don't want her to know? I mean, my mother stepped closer, her voice becoming cold and threatening, that if you tell her and it causes her stress and something bad happens, it will be your fault. Do you want to be held accountable for killing your grandmother? The accusation lingered in the air like poison. I should have backed down. The old Natalie would have. But something had changed within me. Something had finally broken. Grandma deserves to know what happened to her property, I said quietly, and I will not lie to her. I turned and walked away before they could reply. I didn't sleep that night. My apartment felt smaller than usual, a modest one-bedroom that my parents had always mocked as evidence of poor lifestyle choices. I sat on my second-hand couch, looking at a framed photograph on the bookshelf. Grandma Margaret performing her final concert 22 years ago, her fingers poised above the keys, her face luminous with determination. That same piano, which they had sold as if it were nothing. My mother's words circled in my mind. If something happens, it will be your responsibility. Was she correct? Would the shock be too much for Grandma? Would I be causing her more pain in her last days? But then I remembered what Grandma had always taught me. When I was 12 and didn't want to tell my parents I had failed a math test, she told me that the truth could hurt, but lies always cause deeper wounds. They simply take longer. I pulled my knees to my chest and reflected on the previous 29 years. I'd always kept quiet to maintain the peace. Every time I accepted less because fighting seemed futile. Every time I made myself smaller so that my family would feel larger. And where had it led me? Here, alone, invisible, watching them erase Grandma's wishes as if her words had no meaning. If I remained silent now, I would not be keeping the peace. I would be becoming complicit. By 2:40 a.m., I had made my decision. Grandma deserved the truth. She deserved to know that her son had stolen from her, lied to her, and thought she was too weak to matter anymore. And perhaps, just maybe, I deserved to stop apologizing for my existence. I set an alarm for early morning. I would visit hospice before school. I'd tell her everything. When I arrived, Grandma was awake, propped up against her pillows, watching the sunrise through the window. "You look like you haven't slept," she said softly. "I haven't." I pulled a chair up to her bed and took her hand. "Grandma, I have to tell you something, and it's going to hurt." Despite everything, her eyes remained sharp, studying my face. "Then tell me." So I did. The empty space in her living room. The $12,500. The Mercedes-Benz gleamed with Haley's name. My father's casual dismissal. My mother's chilling threat. I told her everything, bracing myself for tears, shock, the kind of devastation that would shatter what remained of her fragile heart. Instead, Grandma Margaret exhaled slowly. Not a single gasp of pain. Not a scream of betrayal. A sigh. Someone who already knew what was about to happen. "Grandma," I whispered. She turned to face me, her expression not one of grief. It was calm, almost resigned. "I knew this might happen, sweetheart. Didn't you know? I know my son." Her voice was steady. "I've watched him develop into this person for 42 years. I hoped he would change, but I was also ready for the possibility that he would not." My thoughts raced. How? How was she prepared? She didn't respond directly. Instead, she reached for her bedside table. "Could you hand me my phone?" I passed it to her, perplexed. She quickly scrolled through her contacts, found a name, and pressed the call button. Then she turned it on speaker. 3 rings. Then a deep, measured male voice. "How are you feeling, Margaret?" "I'm dying, Graham, but I'm clear-headed and it's time." A pause. "I understand. When?" "Sunday. Claire's birthday party. At my house." "I'll prepare the documents." "Thank you, old friend." She ended the call and gave me a knowing smile. "Grandma," I said, staring at her. "Who is Graham?" "Graham Whitaker," she said, gently placing the phone down. "He has been my attorney for 32 years. He was your grandfather's close friend. Do you have your own attorney, Natalie?" "I have many things your father doesn't know about." Despite the exhaustion on her face, her eyes twinkled. "Thomas assumes he knows everything about my affairs. He has always assumed that. It's his greatest weakness." I felt like I was standing on the edge of something vast, peering down into depths I couldn't see. "What's going on at Mom's birthday party this Sunday?" "Justice." Grandma squeezed my hand. Delayed, perhaps, but justice nonetheless. "I don't understand." "You don't need to understand everything just yet." She leaned back against her pillows, looking tired. "I just need you to do one thing for me." "Anything." "Come to the party, dress nicely, and bring your patience." A ghostly smile. The kind of patience I taught you when you were learning Chopin and wanted to throw the sheet music across the room. I almost laughed despite everything. Is it that bad? Worse, but necessary. Her expression became softer. Your father and mother need to understand that their actions have consequences, and I've spent the last 6 years ensuring that when the lesson comes, it will be unforgettable. 6 years. She had been planning something for 6 years. Grandma, what have you done? She closed her eyes, exhaustion taking over. I protected you, sweetheart, as I should have all along. I'm just sorry I took so long to act. I sat with her until she fell asleep, my thoughts racing with questions. Graham Whittaker. Sunday. My mother's birthday party. At Grandma's house. Something was going to change. I could feel it. I simply didn't know what. 2 days later, I was sitting in a small law office on the outskirts of Philadelphia. Graham Whittaker was not what I had expected. He was in his early 70s, with silver hair and gold-rimmed glasses. His movements were slow and precise. His office smelled of old leather and paper, lined from floor to ceiling with legal volumes. Natalie Bennett. He held out his hand. Your grandmother is constantly talking about you. It's nice to finally meet you. Mr. Whittaker, Graham, please. He motioned toward a chair across from his desk. Sit. Your grandmother asked me to explain a few things before Sunday. I sat. My hands trembled slightly. Your grandmother is a remarkable woman, Graham began. She's also far more astute than her children realize. She has been observing and planning. Planning what exactly? He folded his hands on the desk. Tell me, Natalie, do you know who owns the house where your parents live? They do. Grandma gave it to them after Grandpa died. Graham's expression didn't change. Is that what you were told? It's what everyone says. Everyone's wrong. He took a folder from his desk drawer and slid it across to me. Your grandmother let Thomas and Claire live in that house for free, but she never transferred ownership. Not legally. Not ever. I focused on the document in front of me, the property deed. Margaret. Whitmore's name, clear as day. No transfer. No amendment. They've been living in her house for 11 years, I said slowly, assuming it was theirs. Precisely. My head was spinning. Why would Grandma let them believe? Because she was watching Natalie. Graham leaned in. She waited to see if her son would prove her fears wrong. Unfortunately, he did exactly as she expected. That night, I returned to my apartment and began searching. Grandma had given me a box of old belongings years ago. Photographs, letters, pressed flowers from her garden. I'd never looked through it thoroughly. It felt overly intimate, like reading someone's diary. But I needed answers. I discovered it at the bottom, beneath a stack of faded concert programs. An old, yellowed, sealed envelope. My name was written in Grandma's elegant script, with 6 words underneath it. For Natalie, when you need to understand. My fingers quivered as I opened it. Inside, it contained a single photograph, a legal document copy. The header was partially obscured, but I could see Grandma's signature at the bottom, dated 6 years ago. A note in her handwriting was clipped to the corner. The house never left my possession, sweetheart. It was only borrowed, and some borrowers do not deserve the benefit. I reread it 3 times. Then I understood. Sunday's party was being held at Grandma's house. My parents treated the house as their own. They had previously hosted dinner parties and holiday gatherings there. They sold the piano that sat in the living room as if it belonged to them, but it did not belong to them. It never had. My father's entire sense of status was built on a non-existent foundation. I recalled all the times he'd lectured me on real assets and sound investments. All the times he mocked my small apartment while standing in a house he didn't even own. The irony was nearly too perfect. I tucked the letter back into its envelope and placed it on my nightstand. Sunday was 4 days away. Whatever Grandma had planned would take place in the territory my parents had claimed, and they had no idea what to expect. The night before the party, Grandma called. Her voice was weaker than before, and I could hear how much effort she put into each word, but her mind remained razor sharp. "Natalie, are you prepared for tomorrow?" "I think so." I paused. "Are you sure about this, Grandma? It's Mom's birthday, in front of all those people." "That's precisely why it needs to be tomorrow." She took a slow breath. "Your father sold my piano in front of everybody. He announced it at last month's family dinner as if it was his decision. He did not ask me. He did not think about you. He assumed that I was too weak and you were too quiet to matter." I closed my eyes. "I remember." "Then you understand why the lesson needs witnesses." Her voice softened. "I am not doing this for vengeance, sweetheart. Revenge is meaningless. I'm doing this because it's right, and you deserve to be safe, especially after I leave." Tears welled behind my eyes. "Grandma, I should have acted sooner. I watched how they treated you for years, and hoped Thomas would change. That was my mistake. Love blinded me for far too long. This is not your fault." "Perhaps not entirely, but I can still make things right." A pause. "I do not have much time left, Natalie. The doctors say 6 weeks, but I believe it is less. I can feel it, and I need to know, do you trust me?" "Always." "Then come tomorrow. Wear something that will make you feel strong. And no matter what happens, remember that you are not the villain in this story. You never were." We said goodnight. I kept the phone against my chest for a long time after she hung up. Nothing would be the same tomorrow. I just had to be willing to let go. Sunday dawned with pale winter sunlight and the crisp air that makes everything seem sharper. Grandma's house, my parents' borrowed home, appeared almost festive. Someone had hung a banner wishing Claire a happy 62nd birthday across the porch. Cars lined the driveway, spilling onto the street. I parked at the far end and sat in my car for a moment to gather myself. I wore a navy blue dress with simple but elegant pearl earrings that my grandmother had given me for my 22nd birthday. My hair was neatly pinned back, armor for a battle I didn't quite understand. The house was buzzing with approximately 34 guests. Aunts and uncles I only saw on holidays, old neighbors, and a few of my father's business associates. I recognized Mr. Reynolds near the fireplace, with Carter standing beside him and Haley on his arm. The living room immediately caught my eye. The corner where the Steinway had stood for 30 years was now empty. Someone had placed a large potted plant there to fill the void. It looked ridiculous, a leafy green apology for something that could not be apologized away. My mother stood near the dining table in a red designer gown, accepting compliments like a queen being honored. My father remained nearby, working the room with practiced charm. Graham Whitaker sat in the far corner, almost invisible among the crowd, his leather briefcase beside his chair. He caught my eye from across the room and gave an almost imperceptible nod. I nodded back. My Aunt Lillian, Grandma's younger sister, appeared beside me. "Natalie, sweetheart, how is Margaret doing?" "Tired," I admitted, "but still sharp." She was always the smart one. Aunt Lillian's gaze shifted to the empty corner. I noticed the piano is gone. Thomas stated that Margaret wanted to sell it. I opened my mouth to respond, but my father's voice broke through the crowd. "Everyone, if I could have your attention, please." My father stood in the center of the living room, crystal glass raised, commanding the space as if he owned it, which I now realized he did not. "Today, we celebrate 62 wonderful years of Claire Bennett." Applause. My mother was beaming. "And I also want to take a moment to share some exciting family news." My stomach dropped. As some of you know, our daughter Haley has been seeing Carter Reynolds, the son of my dear friend and partner, Victor. He gestured toward Carter, who smiled politely. "And to celebrate her bright future, we have a special surprise." He led the entire party outside, where a gleaming silver Mercedes-Benz sat in the driveway with a red bow on its hood. A gift, my father proudly declared, made possible by Grandma Margaret's generosity. She sold her antique piano to provide for her granddaughter's future. Haley squealed, wrapped her arms around my father, and posed for photos next to the car. I stood frozen on the porch. He was doing it again, rewriting the story, making himself the hero while completely ignoring Grandma's wishes. A woman I didn't recognize leaned towards her husband. Wasn't the piano supposed to go to the other granddaughter who teaches music? Her husband shrugged. Guess plans changed. Aunt Lillian appeared beside me, her face paler. Natalie, did Margaret actually agree to this? Before I could respond, Haley noticed me and called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Natalie, come take a photo. Don't get jealous. I'm sure Grandma will leave something for you too. Perhaps she has an old collection of sheet music. Scattered laughter echoed throughout the crowd. My hands were shaking. My vision was blurred with tears that I refused to let fall. Then, behind me, I heard a briefcase click open. Everyone started filing back inside, but Aunt Lillian obstructed my father's path. Thomas. Her voice was steady, but I noticed her hands trembling. I need to ask you something. My father's smile didn't change. Can it wait, Lillian? We are in the middle of, did you ask Margaret before selling the piano? The question landed like a stone in still waters. Conversations nearby came to a halt. Mother is in hospice, my father stated calmly. She is not in a position to make these kinds of decisions. We did our best for her. I spoke to her this morning. Aunt Lillian's voice became stronger. She is clear-headed, Thomas. Perfectly clear. And she said you never asked her permission. You never even told her. More people were listening now. I noticed Mr. Reynolds' frown. I noticed Carter shift uncomfortably. My mother pushed forward. Her face flushed. Lillian, it is my birthday. Let's not cause a scene. A scene? Aunt Lillian laughed, but it wasn't funny. Claire, your husband sold Margaret's most valuable possession without her knowledge and spent the money on a car. If anyone is causing a scene, it is not me. The room had become quiet. 34 pairs of eyes darted between my aunt and my parents. My father's composure cracked slightly. This is a family matter. It does not have to be discussed in public. Actually, a new voice said from behind us, I think public is exactly where it needs to be discussed. I turned. Graham Whitaker was standing with his briefcase open and a folder of documents in his hand. He walked calmly toward the center of the room, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Graham Whitaker. I am Margaret Whitmore's attorney. My father's face turned white. The silence was suffocating. Graham took up a position near the empty corner where the piano once stood, which felt deliberate. I apologize for interrupting the celebration, he said, his voice easily heard across the room. But Margaret Whitmore has asked me to address some urgent matters regarding her estate. Given the circumstances, she felt it was important that her family and those close to them hear this directly. My father discovered his voice first. My mother has an attorney? Since when? Since 32 years ago, Thomas. Graham's tone was polite, yet cutting. I also represented your father. You would know this if you had bothered to ask. Muffled gasps echoed throughout the room. Someone in the back said, Oh my God, this is outrageous. My mother stepped forwards. Margaret is dying. She is not in her right mind. Whatever papers you have. Graham raised a hand to silence her. I saw Margaret this morning. Her nurse, Nancy, confirms that she is fully competent and lucid. She dictated detailed instructions for today's meeting. He opened the folder and took out a document. Now, I understand there's been some confusion about property ownership, so let me clarify. He held up the paper. This is the deed to the house we are currently standing in. I watched my father's face turn colorless. Note the name on the deed. Margaret Whitmore. Not Thomas Bennett. Not Claire Bennett. Graham paused to let the word sink in. This house was never transferred. It was never a gift. Your parents have lived here rent-free for 11 years, thanks to Margaret's generosity. Nothing more. The room erupted with whispers. My father grabbed the edge of a chair to steady himself. Haley stared at her father, confusion and panic etched on her face. And Graham Whitaker wasn't finished. That, he said quietly, is just the beginning. This is impossible. My father's voice crackled. Mother claimed the house was ours. She promised. She promised you could live here. Graham placed the deed on the dining table so that everyone could see it. She never promised ownership. There is a significant legal difference, Mr. Bennett. I watched as the realization spread throughout the room like wildfire. Mr. Reynolds took a small step away from my father. One of the neighbors shared a knowing look with her husband. For 11 years, Graham continued, you've enjoyed this property without having to pay rent, utilities, or property taxes, which are all covered by Margaret's accounts. You've treated it like your own. You've even made changes without permission. He took a glance at the modern light fixtures that my mother had installed last year. Legally, you are tenants at will, and the property owner has the right to terminate that arrangement at any time. You can't be serious, my mother said, her voice shrill. We've lived here for more than a decade. We've made an investment in this house. Invested without authorization. Graham's expression remained unchanged. Any improvements you've made without written consent belong to the property owner, Margaret Whitmore. Haley grabbed Carter's arm. This is insane. Dad, tell them this is a joke. My father could not speak. He looked at the deed as if it were a death warrant. I should also mention, Graham said almost casually, that Pennsylvania law takes property fraud very seriously. Representing someone else's property as your own, especially in business situations, can have serious legal ramifications. Mr. Reynolds' expression changed from confusion to cold calculation. He no longer saw my father as a partner, but rather as a liability. My father's empire, built on borrowed prestige, was crumbling before our eyes, and Graham still had more documents in his folder. Now, Graham said, pulling out a second document, we come to the matter of a trust. What trust? My father's voice barely rose above a whisper. Margaret Whitmore established a separate trust 6 years ago, independent of the will that was shared with your family. This trust was established specifically to safeguard her most valuable assets in the event of, he paused delicately, financial misconduct. Financial misconduct. My mother sputtered. We're her family. Family members can still commit misconduct, Mrs. Bennett, as recent events have demonstrated. Graham withdrew a thick document with crisp, official-looking pages. Per the terms of this trust, the following assets are irrevocably assigned to a single beneficiary. The property we're standing in, Margaret's financial accounts, and all items of sentimental value, including the 1896 Steinway piano that was recently sold without authorization. He looked up, his gaze fixed on me. The sole beneficiary is Natalie Rose Bennett. The room became absolutely quiet. Haley's shriek shattered it. What? This is fraudulent. My father yelled. She was manipulated. That little. He pointed at me, his face contorted in rage. Thomas. Graham's voice was ice. I would advise you to choose your next words carefully. More than 34 people have witnessed everything said here today. Aunt Lillian came to stand beside me. Her hand grasped mine and squeezed. Margaret knew exactly what she was doing, Graham explained. She spent 6 years watching and waiting, hoping her son would prove her wrong. Instead, he sold her most prized possession to purchase a car for her granddaughter, who never visits her. He paused. Mr. Bennett, Actions have consequences. This is yours. My mother was crying now. Haley looked sick, and I couldn't move, breathe, or believe what I was hearing. Graham waited for the chaos to subside before proceeding. Regarding the piano sale, he retrieved an additional document. Since the Steinway was part of the trust and Natalie is the designated beneficiary, the sale conducted without the trustee's consent, that's Margaret, constitutes unauthorized disposal of trust assets. What does that mean? Haley's voice was small. It means the $12,500 must be returned to the trust within 45 days. Graham swept his gaze over my parents and sister. Failure to comply may result in civil litigation for misappropriation of trust property. Given the clear paper trail, I assure you that the outcome will not be favorable to your family. My father laughed in a hollow, desperate tone. We do not have $12,500 sitting around. The money went to the car. Then I suggest you find a way to liquidate that asset. Graham nodded toward the window where the Mercedes, complete with red bow, was still visible in the driveway. The dealer might accept a return, though you'll likely take a significant loss. Haley burst out in tears. My car! Are you taking my car? I'm not taking anything, Miss Bennett, Graham said calmly. I'm simply explaining the legal consequences of your family's choices. I saw Haley look to Carter for support, but he had already moved away from her, his face carefully neutral. His father was whispering something into his ear, and neither of them seemed sympathetic. Additionally, Graham continued, Margaret has asked me to inform you that your living arrangements in this house will be formally restructured. You may stay here temporarily, but a valid lease agreement will be required. A lease? My mom's voice was barely audible. In the house where we've lived for 11 years. In the house, Graham gently corrected, that you never owned. The room had become deathly quiet. Every eye was on me. My father turned slowly, his face contorted with betrayal and rage. You did it. You poisoned her against us. I stood my ground. No, father, I didn't do anything. My voice was more stable than I expected. My grandmother made these decisions 6 years ago, before I knew anything about them. I just found out this week. Liar! My mother's voice was venomous. You've always been jealous of Haley and our family's success. This is your vengeance. Revenge. I felt something cold and hard crystallize within me. I didn't sell Grandma's piano without first asking her. I did not spend the money on my own car. I did not lie to everyone about what occurred. I took a step forward and looked directly at my mother. I didn't say, at least she's useful for something, when I agreed to visit Grandma every day. I am not the person who hung up on me when I asked questions, and I am not the one who threatened to kill Grandma if I told her the truth. Gasps echoed throughout the crowd. Aunt Lillian's hand tightened around mine. I spent 29 years being invisible in this family. My voice remained steady. I accepted it because I believed that was what love required. Shrink yourself to make others comfortable. I looked at my father, my mother, and Haley, who was still crying over her doomed Mercedes. But Grandma taught me something different. She taught me that loving yourself entails standing up for what is right, even if it costs you everything. I took a breath. So, this is what I want you to understand. I'm not sorry anymore. I refuse to remain silent any longer, and I'm over pretending everything is fine when it isn't. The room was completely still. Graham pulled me aside as the crowd dispersed slowly and awkwardly, whispering goodbyes and avoiding eye contact. Natalie, we need to discuss next steps. I nodded, feeling surreal, as if I were watching myself from outside my body. Legally, you have several options, he said softly, so only I could hear. You could demand an immediate eviction. Given the circumstances, your grandmother would support whatever decision you make. I looked across the room at my parents. My father had fallen into a chair, head in his hands. My mother stood frozen by the window, mascara streaking down her face. Haley had vanished, possibly outside, mourning her Mercedes. They appeared broken. A small part of me wanted to twist the knife, to make them feel every ounce of the pain they had caused me over the previous 29 years. But that's not who I wanted to be. I don't want to throw them out, I explained slowly. Not immediately. Graham raised his eyebrow. Are you sure? Yes. I drew a breath. Here is what I want. The $12,500 is returned within 120 days, not 45. I'll give them time to sell the car and sort things out. They can stay in the house under a formal lease agreement for a low rent. After Grandma, I swallowed hard. They will have 15 months to find another place to live. That's remarkably generous given everything. Maybe. I met his gaze, but I am not doing this to punish them. I'm doing it because it's right, and I refuse to be the person they are. Graham gave me a long look. He nodded with a hint of respect in his expression. Your grandmother predicted you'd react this way. She is very proud of you, Natalie. I know. My voice broke. I know she is. Aunt Lillian and two of the remaining guests witnessed the agreement as it was drafted right on the dining room table. My father signed without looking at me. My mother's hand shook so much that she could barely hold the pen. Neither of them said anything. The house had emptied by the time the last signature was placed. Mr. Reynolds and Carter had departed without saying goodbye. I later learned that Carter had driven away while Haley was still crying outside. The birthday cake remained untouched. The banner drooped sadly from the front porch. Aunt Lillian hugged me tightly before departing. You did the correct thing, sweetheart. Margaret would be very proud. She is proud, I stated softly. I talked to her this morning. As if on cue, my phone vibrated. A video call request from Grandma's hospice number. I responded by walking to the empty corner of the living room where the piano used to be. Her face appeared on screen, pale but calm. Nurse Nancy was seen in the background, smiling. Grandma's voice was weak but warm. My brave girl, how are you feeling? Terrified, I admitted, and relieved and sad all at once. That is how courage feels, sweetheart. It is never comfortable. I didn't throw them away. I gave them time. I know. Graham had texted her. Her eyes glistened. Natalie, you're a better person than they deserve. But that is why I chose you. I pressed my hand against the screen, wishing I could hold hers instead. Thank you, Grandma, for everything, for protecting me. Don't thank me. Her smile was tinged with sadness. Just live well. Play music. Be happy. That is how you thank me. I will. I know you will, sweetheart. She closed her eyes. I know you will. I know many of you are probably thinking, so that's it? Did your parents ever change? The honest answer is complicated. Not every story has a perfect ending, but every story has a lesson. The first week after the party was chaos. News travels fast in small social circles, and the story of what happened at Claire Bennett's 62nd birthday spread like wildfire. My father's business partners suddenly became unavailable for meetings. Old friends stopped returning calls. Mr. Reynolds formally withdrew from the joint venture they'd been planning. When my father demanded an explanation, the response was cold. I can't do business with someone I can't trust, Thomas. If you deceive your own mother, what would you do to a partner? The deal would have been worth over $240,000. Gone in an instant. Haley had to return the Mercedes. The dealership only offered her $87,500, $15,000 less than my parents had paid. She screamed at the salesman for 20 minutes before finally signing the paperwork. Carter broke up with her 4 days later via text message. My family thinks it's best if we take some time apart. Translation: they wanted nothing to do with the Bennett family drama. My sister, who had always been the golden child, found herself suddenly ordinary. No car, no wealthy boyfriend, no special status. She had to borrow my mother's old Honda to get to job interviews. I didn't gloat. I didn't reach out. I simply went about my life, teaching piano to my students, visiting Grandma every evening. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some quiet satisfaction in watching the facades crumble. My father had spent years measuring success in appearances. The house, the car, the right connections. Now he was learning that none of it had ever been real. The foundation he'd built his identity on was borrowed, and borrowed things always have to be returned. 3 weeks after the birthday party, the hospice called me at 5:30 a.m. "You should come now," the nurse said gently. "She's asking for you." I drove faster than I should have, my heart pounding the entire way. Grandma's room was quiet when I arrived. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft golden shadows across her bed. Her breathing was shallow, her face paper thin, but her eyes were open, and when she saw me, she smiled. "My Natalie." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Come sit with me." I took her hand. It felt so fragile, like holding a bird. "I have something to tell you," she said slowly. "Something I should have said years ago." "What is it, Grandma?" "I'm sorry." I blinked. "Sorry for what?" "For not acting sooner." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I watched how they treated you year after year. I kept hoping Thomas would change, that Claire would see your value. I made excuses because I didn't want to believe my own son could be." She trailed off. "It's not your fault," I said, my own tears streaming down. "Perhaps not entirely, but I could have done more. I could have protected you sooner instead of waiting until I was dying." She barely squeezed my hand. "I apologize, sweetheart. You deserved better. You gave me everything that mattered," I declared vehemently. "Music, love, the realization that I was worth something. That is more than they ever gave me." She smiled, and for a moment, she reminded me of my grandmother from childhood. Strong, radiant, full of life. "I'm so proud of you, Natalie. You have a good heart, but you finally learned to protect it. You taught me that. Then I did something right." Her eyes fluttered shut. "I am tired now, sweetheart. Stay with me always." Grandma, Margaret, died peacefully that evening, holding my hand in hers. The funeral took place 6 days later at the small church she had attended for 52 years. It was as simple as she had wished. There were no elaborate flowers or ostentatious displays, just music, memories, and people who genuinely loved her. I played the piano at the service. It wasn't the Steinway that was gone, but a modest upright that the church had owned for decades. I played Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the first piece Grandma taught me. The church was halfway full. Aunt Lillian sat in the front row, holding tissues in her hand. Several pews were filled with Grandma's former performing friends, white-haired women who remembered when Margaret Whitmore's name meant something in the world of classical music. My parents sat at the back. They did not approach me before the service, during it, or afterward. My mother wore dark sunglasses that covered her eyes. My father stared straight ahead, as if he were attending his own sentencing. Haley was not there at all. "Too emotionally fragile," my mother replied to someone who inquired. I gave the eulogy. I discussed Grandma's music, her wisdom, and her quiet strength. I mentioned how she taught me that love isn't about grand gestures. It was about showing up every day and deciding to see someone for who they truly were. I did not mention the drama. The funeral wasn't the appropriate setting. Following the service, my father began walking toward me. I saw him pause, take a step, and then stop when my mother grabbed his arm and drew him away. He never managed to cross the room. Perhaps he wanted to apologize. Perhaps not. I will never know. But I'd already accepted the fact that some apologies never come, and others are no longer necessary. 7 months later, I moved into Grandma's home. It felt strange at first, walking through rooms infused with her presence and sleeping in the guest bedroom I'd known since childhood. However, it gradually began to feel like home. I used some of the returned funds to purchase a new piano. Not a Steinway, which costs much more than $12,500, but a lovely Yamaha grand that filled the space where Grandma's piano once stood. Different but meaningful in its own right. A new beginning. I began teaching private lessons on weekends. My first student was Aunt Lillian's granddaughter, Olivia, who was 9 years old, bright-eyed, and had the same impatient energy as I did. I cried when she played her first complete scale. My parents moved out 3 months after Grandma died. They did not wait the full 15 months that I had offered. They refused to live somewhere with so many painful memories. I believe they couldn't stand the reminder of what they had lost. They purchased a small condominium across town. My father's business was struggling and had been reduced to half of its former size. My mother joined a different social club where no one knew about our family history. We did not speak. Distance, not anger. Some gaps are too big to bridge. But I was not bitter. Bitterness is exhausting, and I had a life to lead. In the evenings, I would sit at the piano and play until the stars appeared. Chopin, Bach, or simply improvise melodies that went nowhere and everywhere. Grandma's presence remained in those moments. In the scent of lavender from the garden she had planted. In the creak of the old floors. In the way the sunlight fell through the windows at sunset. She was gone, but she was present everywhere. And I was finally free. 9 months after the funeral, my phone rang. Haley. I waited 3 rings before answering. Natalie. Her voice sounded different, smaller, less certain. Haley. Silence spread between us. 29 years of sisterhood reduced to awkward pauses. I'm not calling to ask for anything, she finally said. I wanted to say something. Okay. I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, especially how I acted. She took a shaky breath. I was extremely angry at first. At you. At Grandma. At everyone. I thought you had taken something from me. And now. Another pause. Now I work at an entry-level marketing firm. I take the bus because I cannot afford a car, and I have started going to therapy. I did not respond. I just listened. My therapist says I have a lot of unpacking to do regarding Mom and Dad, regarding how I was raised, about why I thought I deserved everything without having earned it. Her laugh was hollow. It turns out being the favorite isn't a gift. It's a trap. I'm glad you're working through it, I replied. I'm not asking you to forgive me. Her voice cracked. I don't deserve that. I just wanted to let you know that I now understand why you did what you did. Why Grandma did what she did. Grandma loved you too, Haley, I added gently. She just couldn't reward behavior that hurt other people. I know, a sniffle. I know that now. We sat silently for a moment. If you ever want to talk, I said slowly. I am ready to listen. However, re-establishing trust takes time. I understand. Good. We hung up without saying goodbye, not out of rudeness, but because neither of us knew how. Some doors, once closed, opened slowly but may still open. It's spring now, 13 months after Grandma entered hospice. Tonight, I'm sitting at my piano while the sun sets over the garden. The windows are open, and a warm breeze carries the aroma of jasmine and freshly cut grass. I play Grandma's favorite nocturne, which she performed at her last concert 22 years ago. The notes drift through the empty house, replacing the silence with something softer. I think about everything that has happened, the betrayal, the reveal. I never thought I'd have the courage to set those boundaries. I think of Grandma, her strength, her patience, her quiet determination to protect me even when I wasn't aware I needed it. I imagine my parents in their small condo, rebuilding a life that will never be exactly what they envisioned. About Haley riding the bus and discovering for the first time what it means to earn money. I don't hate them. Hate consumes too much energy. but I don't need them anymore. And that is a level of freedom I never expected to find. The nocturne ends. The final notes linger in the air before fading into the evening, quiet. I look at Grandma's photo on the piano. At 62, she was radiant, her fingers poised over the Steinway keys. "I'm fine, Grandma," I whisper. "I'm more than okay." I'd like to think she hears me. I close the piano lid, stand and go to the window. The stars are just starting to appear, pinpricks of light in the darkening sky. I do not have the original piano. I do not have the family I thought I did. But I've got something better. I've got myself. I have boundaries. I live a life based on truth rather than silence. And that is the true inheritance Grandma left me. And that is my story.